Maya, a kind black girl, stops her mother's wedding after uncovering a devastating secret that could shatter their world. Little did she know, this bold act would unleash a vengeful force bent on destroying everything they hold dear. With ruthless enemies plotting against them, will Maya and her mother be able to survive the deadly secrets they've exposed? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Maya Johnson sat in the back pew of the church, her heart heavy with worry. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows painted colorful patterns on the floor, but Maya couldn't appreciate their beauty. Her eyes were fixed on her mother, Denise, who stood at the front of the church in a flowing white wedding dress. Denise's face glowed with happiness as she fussed with her veil, surrounded by bridesmaids making last-minute adjustments. Maya's stomach churned. She knew something her mother didn't, a secret that threatened to shatter their world. "Oh, Mom," Maya whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "If only you knew." Maya's mind raced back to the day Richard Tate had first entered their lives. He'd swept her mother off her feet with his charming smile and fancy car. At first, Maya had been happy for her mom. Denise deserved love after so many years of struggling as a single parent. But as the months passed, Maya noticed changes. Her once outgoing mother became quieter, always checking with Richard before making decisions. The laughter that used to fill their small apartment grew less frequent. Maya clenched her fists, remembering the night she'd overheard Richard yelling at her mother. The next day, Denise had explained away her puffy eyes, saying she'd had allergies. But Maya knew better. Curiosity and concern had driven Maya to dig deeper. What she found made her blood run cold. Police reports, restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. Richard Tate had a dark past, hidden behind his perfect smile. Now, watching her mother prepare to marry this man, Maya felt torn. She loved her mom more than anyone in the world. They'd always been a team, just the two of them against the world. The thought of ruining her mother's big day made Maya's heart ache, but she knew she had to act. She couldn't let her mother walk into a life of fear and pain. "Maya, honey," Denise called from the front of the church. "Can you come here for a second?" Maya took a deep breath, steeling herself. As she walked down the aisle towards her mother, she knew that whatever happened next would change their lives forever. But she had to be brave, for both of them. The organ music swelled, filling the church with its solemn melody. Maya's heart raced as she watched Richard take his place at the altar. His smile seemed cold and calculating to her, a stark contrast to the joy radiating from her mother's face as Denise began her walk down the aisle. Denise looked beautiful, her white dress flowing behind her as she moved gracefully toward her future husband. Maya could see the happiness in her mother's eyes, and it made her chest tighten with conflicting emotions. As Denise reached Richard's side, the pastor began to speak. Maya felt as if she were in a dream, the words washing over her without really sinking in. She knew she had to act, but fear kept her rooted to her seat. The ceremony progressed, and soon it was time for the vows. Richard cleared his throat, ready to begin. Maya's palms were sweaty, her breathing shallow. It was now or never. Just as Richard opened his mouth to speak, Maya stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing all eyes to her. "Wait!" Maya cried out, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent church. "You can't marry him, Mom!" Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Denise turned, her face a mix of confusion and concern. "Maya, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. Maya took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her ears. "Richard is hiding something terrible," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He's not who you think he is, Mom." The whispers grew louder. Richard's face darkened, his earlier smile replaced by a scowl. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Maya stood her ground, though her legs felt weak. "I found police reports," she said, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "And restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. He has a history of hurting people." The shock in the room was palpable. Denise's face paled, her eyes darting between her daughter and her fiancé. "Richard?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Is this true? Richard's face contorted with anger. How dare you? He shouted at Maya. You little brat, you've ruined everything. His outburst seemed to confirm Maya's accusations. The church erupted into chaos, with people standing up and talking all at once. Maya felt dizzy with relief and fear, knowing she had done the right thing but terrified of the consequences. Maya stepped forward, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder to her chest. All eyes in the church were fixed on her. A mix of shock, curiosity, and concern etched on the faces of the guests. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. I have proof, Maya said, her voice stronger than she felt. She opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. These are police reports from Richard's past. They show a pattern of domestic violence. A collective gasp echoed through the church. Maya's words hung heavy in the air as she handed the documents to the pastor, who looked them over with wide eyes. Richard's face contorted with rage. You little liar, he shouted, taking a menacing step towards Maya. How dare you make up such ridiculous stories? But Maya stood her ground. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. I have more, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I overheard a phone call Richard made. I recorded it. She pressed play, and Richard's voice filled the church, cold and threatening. If you tell anyone about what happened, I'll make sure you regret it, his recorded voice said. No one will believe you anyway. I've got connections, remember? The color drained from Richard's face as the recording played. He lunged forward, trying to grab the phone from Maya's hand. Give me that, you brat, he yelled. Several guests stood up, moving to protect Maya from Richard's advance. The church was in chaos, with people talking over each other, some defending Richard, others expressing their shock and disgust. Through it all, Denise stood frozen at the altar, her eyes wide and unfocused. She seemed unable to comprehend what was happening, her dream wedding turning into a nightmare before her eyes. Mom, Maya called out, her voice breaking. Mom, please, you have to believe me. I wouldn't lie about this. I love you too much to let you marry someone like him. Denise's gaze slowly focused on her daughter. Tears welled up in her eyes as the truth of the situation began to sink in. She looked at Richard, seeing him for the first time without the veil of love clouding her judgment. The guests were divided. Some stood in disbelief, arguing that Maya must be mistaken or lying. Others murmured in support of the young girl, praising her bravery for speaking up. We should call the police, someone shouted from the back of the church. This is ridiculous, the wedding should continue, another voice countered. As the chaos continued to unfold, Maya stood in the center of it all, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. She had done what she set out to do, expose the truth about Richard before it was too late. Now she could only hope that her mother would make the right choice. Denise turned to Richard, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man she thought she knew. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Richard, is this true? Please, tell me Maya is mistaken. Richard's charming smile faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. He reached out to take Denise's hands, but she pulled away. Darling, you can't possibly believe this nonsense, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Maya is just a confused child. She doesn't understand what she's saying. But the police reports, Denise whispered, her eyes darting between Richard and the papers in the pastor's hands. Richard waved dismissively. Ancient history, my love. Mistakes from a different time, long before I met you. I'm not that person anymore. He turned to glare at Maya. How dare you try to ruin our special day with these lies? Maya felt her knees shaking, but she stood her ground. Mom, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. I wouldn't make this up. You know me. You raised me to always tell the truth, no matter how hard it is. Denise looked at her daughter, seeing the fear and determination in her eyes. She wanted so badly to believe Richard, to continue with the fairy tale wedding she had dreamed of. But the evidence was mounting, and doubt was creeping in. The recording, Richard, Denise said quietly. How do you explain that? Richard's face darkened. It's clearly been doctored. Maya's good with computers, isn't she? She could have easily faked that call. Maya shook her head vigorously. No, Mom. I didn't fake anything. I wouldn't know how. The church was silent now, everyone waiting with bated breath to see what Denise would do. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve in her gaze. I'm sorry, Richard, she said, her voice gaining strength. But I can't ignore this. I need to know the truth. With shaking hands, Denise reached for her phone, which was tucked away in a small purse held by her maid of honor. She dialed 911, her eyes never leaving Richard's face. Hello? Yes, I need the police at St. Mary's Church on Oak Street, she said into the phone. There's been an accusation of domestic violence. We need help sorting this out. As Denise made the call, Richard's charm finally cracked. His face contorted with rage, and he lunged towards Maya. You little brat, he snarled. You've ruined everything. Several guests quickly moved to restrain Richard, while others surrounded Maya protectively. Denise dropped her phone and rushed to her daughter's side, wrapping her arms around her. I'm so sorry, baby, Denise whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. Thank you for being so brave. Maya clung to her mother, finally allowing herself to cry. I just wanted to protect you, Mom, she sobbed. I love you so much. As they held each other, the sound of sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The wail of sirens grew louder as 2 police cars pulled up in front of the church. The guests, still in shock, parted to make way for the officers as they strode down the aisle. The once joyous atmosphere had turned somber, the air thick with tension. Officer Johnson, a tall woman with kind eyes, approached Denise and Maya. Ma'am, we received a call about a domestic violence accusation. Can you tell us what's going on? Denise, still clutching Maya, nodded weakly. Her voice trembled as she spoke. My daughter. She uncovered some information about my fiancé, Richard Tate. There are police reports and a recording. Maya stepped forward, her heart pounding. I have everything here, officer, she said, handing over the evidence she had gathered. As the police examined the documents, Richard stood off to the side, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Officer Johnson's partner, Officer Davis, approached him. Sir, we're going to need to ask you some questions. Richard's charm switched on like a light. Of course, officer. This is all just a big misunderstanding. I'm sure we can clear this up quickly. The officers spoke with Richard, Denise, and Maya separately. The guests watched in stunned silence as the dream wedding unraveled before their eyes. Some whispered among themselves, while others offered comforting words to Denise and Maya. After what felt like hours but was only about 30 minutes, Officer Johnson approached Richard again. Mr. Tate, based on the evidence presented and our initial investigation, we're going to have to take you down to the station for further questioning. Richard's facade finally cracked. This is ridiculous, he shouted, his face turning red. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? As the officers handcuffed Richard and led him away, Maya felt a strange mix of emotions wash over her. Relief that the truth was finally out, but also a deep sadness for her mother's shattered dreams. She watched as Denise sank into a nearby pew, her wedding dress pooling around her. Maya approached her mother cautiously. Mom, she said softly, are you okay? Denise looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Oh, Maya, she whispered, I can't believe this is happening. How could I have been so blind? Maya sat down next to her mother, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. It's not your fault, Mom. Richard fooled a lot of people. As they sat there, surrounded by the remnants of what should have been the happiest day of Denise's life, Maya felt the full weight of her actions settle on her shoulders. She had saved her mother from a potentially dangerous situation, but at what cost? The church was eerily quiet now, save for the soft murmurs of the remaining guests and the occasional sniffle from Denise. As the police car carrying Richard disappeared around the corner, Denise turned to Maya, her eyes a mix of confusion, hurt, and gratitude. She gently took her daughter's hand and led her to a quiet corner of the church. "Maya, sweetheart," Denise began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know everything. How did you find out about Richard's past?" Maya took a deep breath, her young face etched with worry and relief. "It started a few weeks ago, Mom. I overheard Richard on the phone late one night. He sounded angry, and I heard him mention something about keeping the past buried. It scared me, so I started paying more attention." Denise listened intently, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. Maya continued, "I noticed how he'd get really tense whenever his old hometown was mentioned, so I did some digging online. I found old newspaper articles about domestic violence cases in his town. They didn't name him, but the details matched up." "Oh, Maya," Denise breathed, her voice catching. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Maya's eyes welled up with tears. "I was scared, Mom. I didn't want to hurt you, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let you marry him without knowing the truth." Denise pulled Maya into a tight hug, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I can't believe I didn't see it," she whispered. "Thank you, sweetie. You were so brave." As they held each other, the church doors swung open with a loud bang. A tall, elegantly dressed woman strode in, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Her steely gaze swept the room before landing on Denise and Maya. "Well," she said, her voice as cold as ice, "I see my son's wedding has been quite dramatically interrupted." Maya felt her mother stiffen beside her. "Eleanor," Denise said, straightening up and wiping her tears. "I'm sorry, but given the circumstances—" Eleanor Tate cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Spare me your apologies, Denise. I'm here to clean up this mess and salvage what's left of my family's reputation." She turned her piercing gaze to Maya, who instinctively shrank back. "And you, young lady?" Eleanor continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've caused quite a stir today, haven't you?" Maya felt a surge of courage. "I only told the truth," she said, her voice small but steady. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "The truth as you see it. But let me assure you, this little stunt of yours won't go unpunished. The Tate family has ways of dealing with those who cross us." Denise stepped forward, placing herself between Eleanor and Maya. "That's enough," she said firmly. "You will not threaten my daughter." Eleanor Tate surveyed the chaotic scene before her, her icy composure a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil surrounding her. With a practiced smile, she addressed the murmuring crowd of wedding guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor's voice rang out, silencing the room. "I apologize for this unfortunate turn of events. Please, enjoy some refreshments in the reception hall while we sort out this misunderstanding." As the guests filed out, many casting curious glances behind them, Eleanor's gaze locked onto Denise. With a subtle nod, she beckoned the would-be bride to follow her into a quiet alcove. Maya watched anxiously as her mother, still in her wedding gown, walked away with Eleanor. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Quietly, she crept closer, straining to hear their conversation. Eleanor's voice was low and controlled, but Maya could hear the underlying menace. "Denise, dear, I hope you realize the gravity of what you and your daughter have done today." Denise straightened her shoulders, trying to match Eleanor's composure. "Eleanor, I understand this is difficult, but Maya was only trying to protect me. If what she found is true—" "Truth is a matter of perception," Eleanor cut in smoothly. "And in this community, perception is everything. You've just ruined my son's reputation based on the word of a child." Maya's heart raced as she listened. She wanted to run to her mom, to defend their actions, but fear kept her rooted to the spot. Eleanor continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be clear, Denise. My family has deep roots in this town. We have connections you can't even imagine. If you think you can humiliate my son and walk away unscathed, you're sorely mistaken." Denise's voice trembled slightly as she responded, "Are you threatening us, Eleanor?" A cold smile played on Eleanor's lips. "Oh, not at all. I'm simply informing you of the consequences of your actions. You and your daughter have made a grave mistake. I promise you, your lives will become very uncomfortable from here on out." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had been so focused on protecting her mom from Richard, she hadn't considered the reach of his family's influence. As Eleanor's words sank in, Maya's fear for their future intensified. What had she unleashed by speaking up? Eleanor's voice dropped even lower, forcing Maya to strain to hear. Every job application mysteriously rejected, every loan denied, every door closed in your faces. That will be my doing. This town will become your prison, Denise, and it's all thanks to your daughter's misguided heroics. Maya's hands trembled as she backed away, her mind reeling from the threats she'd overheard. She had thought exposing Richard would solve everything, but now it seemed their problems were only beginning. Moments later, Denise and Maya walked through the front door of their modest home, the silence between them heavy with unspoken emotions. The house felt different now, as if the events of the day had somehow changed even the familiar walls around them. Denise, still in her wedding dress, sank onto the living room couch. She looked lost, her eyes unfocused as she stared at nothing in particular. Maya hesitated, unsure of what to do or say. She had never seen her mother look so vulnerable. "Mom?" Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" Denise blinked, seeming to come back to herself. She patted the space next to her on the couch, inviting Maya to sit. As Maya settled beside her, Denise took a deep breath. I can't believe it," Denise said, her voice shaky. "I thought I knew him. I really thought—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't want to hurt you. "No, sweetie," Denise interrupted, turning to face her daughter. "Don't apologize. You did the right thing." She reached out and took Maya's hand in hers. "I'm the one who should be sorry. I was so blinded by love that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I didn't know if you'd believe me." Denise pulled Maya into a tight hug. "Oh, honey, I will always believe you. Always." She pulled back, looking into Maya's eyes. "What you did today, it was so brave. I am so proud of you." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at her mother's words. "Really?" "Really," Denise affirmed. "You saved me from making a terrible mistake. You were stronger and smarter than I was." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Then Denise spoke again, her voice stronger now. "I want you to know something, Maya. No matter what happens next, we're in this together. You and me, just like it's always been." Maya nodded, feeling a mix of relief and worry. "But what about Eleanor? The things she said?" Denise's jaw tightened. "I know. It won't be easy, but we've faced hard times before. We'll face this too, together." In the days following the wedding disaster, life for Denise and Maya began to unravel at an alarming pace. Eleanor Tate, true to her chilling promise, set her plan in motion to make their lives miserable. It started with whispers. At first, they were barely noticeable, a hushed conversation that stopped when Denise walked by at the grocery store, or a group of parents huddled together at Maya's school, shooting furtive glances in their direction. But soon the whispers grew louder, more insistent, impossible to ignore. Denise first noticed something was wrong at work. She'd been a respected nurse at the local hospital for years, known for her kindness and dedication. But now her co-workers seemed to be avoiding her. One day, she overheard two of them talking in the break room. "I heard she's unstable," one whispered. "Can you imagine letting someone like that care for patients?" Denise felt her heart sink. She wanted to confront them, to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she fight against shadows and whispers? For Maya, school became a daily ordeal. The friends she'd known since kindergarten suddenly found reasons to sit at different lunch tables. In the hallways, she caught snippets of conversations that made her cheeks burn with shame. "I heard her mom's crazy," a girl said, not bothering to lower her voice as Maya passed. "Like, actually crazy. My mom says we shouldn't hang out with her anymore." Maya tried to hold her head high, remembering her mother's words about being strong together. But it was hard when it felt like the whole world was turning against them. Even their neighbors, once friendly and welcoming, now seemed to go out of their way to avoid them. Mrs. Rodriguez, who used to bring over homemade tamales every Sunday, now hurried inside when she saw Denise coming up the street. One evening, as Denise was preparing dinner, her phone rang. It was her supervisor at the hospital. "Denise," he said, his voice tight with discomfort, "we need to talk about some concerns that have been raised about your performance." Denise felt her stomach drop. She knew this wasn't about her work. It was about the rumors. Eleanor's influence was reaching further than she'd ever imagined. As she hung up the phone, Maya came into the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "why is everyone being so mean to us?" Denise pulled her daughter into a tight hug, feeling Maya's tears soak into her shirt. She wished she had an answer, wished she could make it all better. But the truth was, she felt just as lost and scared as Maya did. Denise tried her best to keep a brave face for Maya, but the constant pressure was taking its toll. Each morning, she'd plaster on a smile and assure her daughter that everything would be all right. But as the days wore on, the smile became more forced and the light in her eyes dimmed. Maya wasn't fooled. She saw the way her mother's shoulders slumped when she thought no one was looking. She noticed the dark circles under Denise's eyes, growing deeper with each passing day. The guilt gnawed at Maya's insides, a constant reminder that she was responsible for their current situation. "Mom, are you okay?" Maya asked one morning, watching Denise stare blankly into her coffee cup. Denise blinked as if coming out of a trance. "Of course, sweetie. Just a little tired, that's all." She reached out and squeezed Maya's hand. "Don't you worry about me." But Maya did worry. She worried all the time. At school, things were getting worse. The whispers had turned into outright taunts, and Maya found herself dreading each day. As she walked down the hallway, a group of girls snickered and pointed. "There she is," one of them said loudly. "The girl who ruined her mom's wedding." "I heard her mom's crazy," another chimed in, like totally lost it. Maya quickened her pace, her cheeks burning with shame. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were wrong, that her mom was the bravest person she knew. But the words stuck in her throat. During lunch, Maya sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria. She picked at her food, not really hungry. A boy from her class, Tommy, approached her table. "Hey Maya," he said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "How's your mom? Still seeing things that aren't there?" Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Leave me alone, Tommy," she mumbled. "Aw, come on," Tommy pressed. "We're all dying to know. Is she locked up yet? My dad says it's only a matter of time." Something inside Maya snapped. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Shut up!" she yelled, her voice echoing through the cafeteria. "You don't know anything about my mom." The room fell silent, all eyes on Maya. She grabbed her backpack and ran out, not stopping until she reached the bathroom. Locking herself in a stall, she finally let the tears fall. As she sat there, surrounded by the cold tile walls, Maya began to question everything. Had she done the right thing by speaking up at the wedding? She'd been so sure then, so certain that she was protecting her mom. But now, seeing how much Denise was suffering, Maya wasn't so sure anymore. "Maybe I should have just kept quiet," she whispered to herself, her voice echoing in the empty bathroom. "Maybe we'd be better off if I hadn't said anything at all." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across their living room, a gentle knock on the door startled Denise and Maya from their quiet contemplation. Denise rose wearily, her movements slow and hesitant. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Miss Lorraine?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly woman stood on their porch, her kind eyes twinkling with warmth. "Hello, Denise. I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." Denise shook her head, stepping aside to let Miss Lorraine in. "Not at all. Please come in." Maya peered curiously from the couch as Miss Lorraine entered, her silver hair neatly pinned back, a gentle smile on her face. The older woman had been a fixture at their church for as long as Maya could remember, always ready with a kind word or a comforting hug. "Maya, dear," Miss Lorraine said, settling into an armchair. "How are you holding up?" Maya shrugged, her eyes downcast. I'm okay, I guess. Miss Lorraine reached out, patting Maya's knee. It's all right to not be okay, you know. What you've been through, what you're still going through, it's not easy. Denise sat down next to Maya, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. We're managing, she said, but the weariness in her voice betrayed her words. Miss Lorraine nodded, her eyes full of understanding. I know you are, but I also know how hard it can be to stand up for what's right, especially when it feels like the whole world is against you. Maya looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, she admitted quietly. Oh, honey, Miss Lorraine said, leaning forward. Let me tell you something. Standing up for the truth often comes with difficult consequences, but it's always the right thing to do. As Miss Lorraine spoke, her words seemed to fill the room with a warmth that had been missing for weeks. She shared stories from her own life, times when she had to make tough choices and face the fallout. With each tale, Maya felt a little of the weight lift from her shoulders. You see, Miss Lorraine concluded, the truth may hurt for a while, but lies hurt forever. You protected your mother, Maya. You showed incredible courage and love. Denise squeezed Maya's hand, her eyes brimming with tears. She's right, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a spark of peace in her heart. She looked at her mother, then back at Miss Lorraine, feeling the strength of their support surrounding her. As the afternoon wore on, Miss Lorraine's visit brought a sense of calm to their home that had been missing for far too long. The three of them talked, laughed, and even prayed together. By the time Miss Lorraine left, promising to return soon, both Denise and Maya felt lighter, more hopeful. That night, as Denise tucked Maya into bed, there was a new understanding between them. The bond they shared, tested by recent events, had only grown stronger. I love you, Mom, Maya whispered as Denise kissed her forehead. I love you too, my brave girl, Denise replied, her voice full of emotion. We're going to get through this together. The next morning, as Denise and Maya sat at the kitchen table, the shrill ring of the telephone cut through the quiet. Denise's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the receiver, her eyes meeting Maya's across the table. Hello? Denise answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya watched her mother's face intently, noticing how Denise's eyes widened and her grip on the phone tightened. The color drained from her cheeks as she listened to the voice on the other end. I see, Denise said softly. Thank you for letting me know. Yes, I understand. As Denise hung up the phone, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. Maya leaned forward, worry etched across her young face. Mom, who was that? Denise reached out and took Maya's hand in hers. That was the police, sweetheart. They were calling about Richard. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. What did they say? Denise's voice quivered as she spoke. They've uncovered more about Richard's past. It's worse than we thought. She paused, gathering her strength before continuing. Richard was married before Maya, his ex-wife. She had to run away from him. She moved to another state just to get away from his abuse. Maya's eyes filled with tears, a mix of sadness and relief washing over her. Oh, Mom, she whispered. Denise squeezed Maya's hand tighter. I know it's hard to hear, but I'm so grateful we found out before it was too late. You were right to speak up, Maya. You saved us both. As the weight of the news settled over them, Maya felt a small glimmer of relief. Her instincts had been correct. The nagging feeling that had pushed her to investigate Richard, to risk everything and speak up at the wedding, it had all been justified. Denise stood up and walked around the table, pulling Maya into a tight hug. I'm so sorry you had to carry this burden, sweetheart, but I'm so proud of you. You were so brave. Maya buried her face in her mother's shoulder, letting the tears fall freely now. I was so scared, Mom. I thought you might not believe me. I know, baby, Denise soothed, stroking Maya's hair. But I will always listen to you. Always. As they held each other, both Denise and Maya felt a shift in the air around them. The fear and uncertainty that had clouded their lives since the wedding day seemed to lift slightly. They had each other, and they had the truth. It was a solid foundation to build upon, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The morning after receiving the shocking news about Richard's past, Denise and Maya were startled by a loud knock at their front door. Denise opened it to find a stern-faced man in a suit, holding out an official-looking envelope. "Denise Johnson?" he asked coldly. Denise nodded, her heart racing. "You've been served," the man said, thrusting the envelope into her hands before turning on his heel and walking away. With trembling fingers, Denise opened the envelope. As she read its contents, her face drained of color. Maya, watching from the living room, felt a chill run down her spine. "Mom?" she called out, her voice small and scared. "What is it?" Denise looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "Oh, Maya," she whispered. "It's Eleanor. She's trying to take you away from me." Maya rushed to her mother's side, grabbing the papers. Her eyes widened as she scanned the legal jargon. Custody claim? But why? How can they do this? Denise pulled Maya close, her arms shaking. "They're saying I'm an unfit mother. And Richard? He's demanding joint custody, even with the charges against him." Maya felt her world spinning. The thought of being taken away from her mother, of having to live with Richard and Eleanor, made her feel sick to her stomach. "No," she said firmly. "They can't do this. We won't let them." But as the days passed, the reality of their situation became clear. Eleanor Tate's influence reached far and wide. She hired the best lawyers money could buy, and they were relentless in their pursuit of Maya. Denise tried to put on a brave face for her daughter, but Maya could see the toll it was taking. Her mother's eyes were constantly ringed with dark circles, and her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table going over their meager finances, Denise broke down. "I don't know how we're going to fight this, Maya," she sobbed. "Eleanor has so much money, so much power, and I'm just a nurse. How can I compete with that?" Maya reached out and took her mother's hand. "We have something they don't, Mom," she said softly. "We have the truth. And we have each other." Denise squeezed Maya's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's unwavering faith, but the fear lingered in her eyes, a constant reminder of the battle ahead. As the custody hearing loomed closer, Eleanor's attacks grew more vicious. She spread rumors about Denise's mental state, questioning her ability to care for Maya. Richard, despite the mounting evidence against him, played the role of a concerned father, manipulating public opinion with his charm and Eleanor's influence. The legal battle consumed their lives. Denise and Maya spent countless hours with their overworked public defender, preparing for the fight of their lives. But with each passing day, the odds seemed to stack higher against them. Eleanor Tate's wealth and power cast a long shadow over their small town. Her lawyers were everywhere, digging into every aspect of Denise and Maya's lives, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The once friendly community now seemed to eye them with suspicion, whispering behind their backs. Denise sat in the cramped office of Mr. Wilson, a local lawyer who had agreed to meet with her pro bono. The room felt stuffy, and Denise's heart raced as she listened to the lawyer's words. "Mrs. Denise Johnson," Mr. Wilson said, his voice gentle but firm. "I won't sugarcoat this. The Tates have significant resources and influence in this town. Their legal team is top-notch, and Eleanor's social standing could sway many people's opinions." Denise's shoulders slumped. She felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. But what about Richard's history? The police reports? The evidence Maya found? Mr. Wilson sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It will certainly help our case, but the Tates are experts at spinning narratives. They might argue that Richard has changed, that he deserves a second chance. And with their connections, they could potentially bury some of that evidence." Tears welled up in Denise's eyes. She felt trapped, like a mouse cornered by a cat. "So what you're saying is, we might lose Maya?" The lawyer's silence spoke volumes. Denise's world seemed to crumble around her. Unknown to both of them, Maya stood just outside the office door, her ear pressed against the wood. Each word felt like a dagger in her heart. Guilt washed over her in waves. If she hadn't spoken up at the wedding, if she hadn't exposed Richard, none of this would be happening. The thought of being taken away from her mother because of her own actions made her feel sick. Maya's legs felt weak and she stumbled back from the door, bumping into a chair in the hallway. The noise alerted Denise and Mr. Wilson. "Maya?" Denise called out, rushing to open the door. She found her daughter standing there, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Maya sobbed. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't said anything, we wouldn't be in this mess. Now they might take me away from you." Denise's heart broke seeing her daughter in such distress. She pulled Maya into a tight hug, stroking her hair. "Oh, sweetheart, no. This is not your fault. You did the right thing, Maya. You were so brave." Mr. Wilson watched the scene with sympathy. "Your daughter's actions may have complicated things legally, Mrs. Johnson, but she potentially saved you from a very dangerous situation." Denise nodded, still holding Maya close. "He's right, Maya. You protected me, and now we'll face this together. I promise you, I won't let them take you away." But even as she spoke the words, Denise felt a cold fear gripping her heart. The thought of losing Maya was unbearable. She looked over her daughter's head at Mr. Wilson, silently pleading for any glimmer of hope. The lawyer's expression remained grave, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult battle ahead. Denise held Maya tighter, as if she could keep her safe through sheer force of will. The fear of losing her daughter hung in the air, an invisible but palpable presence that threatened to suffocate them both. The following day, Maya sat on a bench outside her school, picking at her lunch without much appetite. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, and she felt drained. As she stared blankly at her sandwich, a familiar voice made her heart skip a beat. "Hello, Maya," Richard said softly, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. Maya's eyes widened in shock and fear. She looked around frantically, but the schoolyard was mostly empty. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Richard smiled, his charm on full display. "I just wanted to talk, sweetie. Can I sit down?" Before Maya could answer, he settled beside her on the bench. She scooted away, her body tense. "Maya, I know things have been difficult," Richard began, his voice smooth and reassuring. "But I want you to know that everything can be okay. We can still be a family if you give me a chance." Maya shook her head, confusion clouding her thoughts. "But the police reports? What you did to your ex-wife?" Richard sighed, looking pained. "The past is the past, Maya. People can change. I've changed. Your mother is just, well, she's become a bit paranoid. She's not seeing things clearly." Maya felt a twinge of doubt. Her mom had been acting differently lately, always looking over her shoulder, jumping at small noises. But wasn't that because of Richard and his mother? "Your mom's been through a lot," Richard continued, his voice dripping with concern. "She's become controlling, hasn't she? Always asking where you are, who you're talking to." Maya bit her lip. It was true that her mom had become more protective lately, but wasn't that normal, given the circumstances? "I just want what's best for both of you," Richard said, placing a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "If you accept me as your stepfather, we can put all this behind us. No more court battles, no more stress for your mom. Wouldn't that be nice?" Maya felt torn. Richard's words were so convincing, his manner so kind. Could she have been wrong about him? Had her actions caused all this trouble for nothing? I don't know," Maya whispered, her voice small and uncertain. Richard smiled warmly. "That's okay, sweetie. Just think about it. Remember, I'm here for you both. I only want to help." As the school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Richard stood up. "I should go now, but Maya, please consider what I've said. We can be a happy family if you give us a chance." He walked away, leaving Maya sitting on the bench, her lunch forgotten and her mind swirling with confusion and doubt. She felt vulnerable and scared, unsure of what to believe anymore. The certainty she had felt on the day of the wedding seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of unease and internal conflict. Maya couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her stomach after her conversation with Richard. As she walked home from school, her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The warm afternoon sun did little to comfort her troubled heart. Passing by the local country club, Maya spotted a familiar car in the parking lot, Richard's sleek black sedan. Her heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Curiosity got the better of her, and she crept closer, keeping out of sight behind a row of neatly trimmed hedges. Through an open window, she heard voices drifting out. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Richard and Eleanor talking in hushed but angry tones. "Mother, we need to move faster," Richard hissed. "That brat is more stubborn than I thought." Eleanor's cold voice replied, "Patience, Richard. We're close to getting what we want." Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she strained to hear more. "Once we have custody of the girl," Eleanor continued, "Denise will have no choice but to fall in line. She'll do anything to keep Maya in her life." Richard chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Maya's spine. "And then we'll have them both exactly where we want them. Denise will be too scared to breathe without our permission." Maya felt her world crumbling around her. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. They didn't care about her at all. She was just a pawn in their cruel game to control her mother. Tears stung Maya's eyes as she stumbled away from the club, her legs shaky and her breath coming in short gasps. How could she have doubted herself? How could she have let Richard's smooth words make her question everything? With renewed determination, Maya broke into a run. She had to get home. She had to tell her mom everything. The truth burned in her chest, desperate to be shared. As Maya raced through the streets, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, she felt a mix of fear and resolve. She knew now, without a doubt, that Richard and Eleanor were dangerous. They didn't want to be a family, they wanted to destroy the only real family Maya had ever known. Panting and out of breath, Maya finally reached her front door. She burst inside, calling out frantically, "Mom, Mom, where are you? I need to talk to you right now." Denise listened intently as Maya poured out everything she had overheard. Her face grew pale, but a fierce determination sparked in her eyes. She pulled Maya into a tight hug, her voice shaky but resolute. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. But thank you for being so brave and telling me," Denise said, stroking Maya's hair. "We're not going to let them win. Not now. Not ever." Maya looked up at her mother, hope blooming in her chest. "What can we do, Mom?" Denise took a deep breath. "We fight back, with everything we've got." Over the next few days, Denise and Maya worked tirelessly. They gathered every scrap of evidence they had against Richard and Eleanor, but they knew they needed something more, a voice that could speak to Richard's true nature. "Susan," Denise whispered one night, a memory clicking into place. "Richard's ex-wife. If we could find her—" Maya's eyes widened. "Do you think she'd help us?" Denise nodded slowly. "If we can convince her it's safe, she might be our best chance." It took days of searching and countless dead ends before they finally got a lead on Susan's whereabouts. When they reached out, Susan was terrified at first, reluctant to dredge up her painful past. "Please," Denise pleaded over the phone. "I know you're scared, but my daughter's future is at stake. You might be the only one who can save her from going through what you did." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Susan's voice came through, quiet but determined. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll testify." Tears of relief streamed down Denise's face as she thanked Susan profusely. When she hung up, she turned to Maya with a watery smile. "We've got a chance now, baby. A real chance." For the first time in weeks, Denise felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't over yet, but with Susan's testimony, they had a fighting chance against Richard and Eleanor's manipulations. The following day, the courtroom buzzed with tension as Denise and Maya entered, hand in hand. They took their seats, trying to ignore the cold stares from Eleanor and her supporters. Maya squeezed her mother's hand, offering silent support. As the proceedings began, Eleanor's high-powered lawyers wasted no time in their attack. They called witness after witness, each one painting a damning picture of Denise as an unfit mother. Denise's heart sank as she listened to people she once considered friends speak against her. "Mrs. Johnson has always been unstable," one neighbor testified, avoiding Denise's hurt gaze. "I've seen her yelling at Maya in the street." Maya's grip on her mother's hand tightened. She knew it was a lie, a twisted version of the time Denise had called out to her in worry when she'd nearly stepped into traffic. Another witness, a co-worker, spoke next. "She's always distracted at work, constantly on her phone. It's not safe for the patients." Denise felt tears prickling her eyes. She'd been frantically searching for legal help during her breaks, trying to save her family. But she couldn't explain that without sounding defensive. Throughout it all, Eleanor sat with a smug smile, occasionally leaning over to whisper to Richard. Their confidence was palpable, and it made Denise's stomach churn. When it was their turn, Denise's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to call our key witness, Susan Tate." A hush fell over the courtroom. Richard's face paled and Eleanor's smile faltered for the first time. "Very well," the judge nodded. "Is Ms. Susan Tate present?" Denise's lawyer glanced nervously at the courtroom doors. "She should be arriving any moment, Your Honor." As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew. Denise felt her palms grow sweaty. Where was Susan? Had she changed her mind? The weight of everything seemed to press down on Denise's shoulders. But then she felt Maya's small hand in hers. She looked down to see her daughter's determined face, those brave eyes that had first uncovered the truth about Richard. In that moment, Denise found her strength again. No matter what happened, she and Maya would face it together. The courtroom doors swung open, and all eyes turned to see a petite woman with auburn hair step inside. Susan Tate had arrived. Her face was pale, but her steps were steady as she made her way to the witness stand. Denise felt a surge of hope, while Richard's confident smirk faltered for the first time. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line as she watched Susan take her oath. "Ms. Tate," Denise's lawyer began gently, "can you tell us about your relationship with Richard Tate?" Susan took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I was married to Richard for 5 years," she said, her voice soft but clear. "At first he was charming and attentive, but it didn't take long for things to change." As Susan spoke, the courtroom fell silent. She described how Richard's behavior shifted, how his charming facade gave way to a controlling, manipulative nature. Her voice trembled as she recounted the first time he'd raised his hand to her. "He always knew just what to say afterward," Susan explained, tears glistening in her eyes. "He'd promise it would never happen again, that he loved me too much, and I wanted so badly to believe him." Maya listened intently, her young face a mix of sadness and anger. She glanced at Richard, who was now visibly uncomfortable, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Susan continued, detailing the escalating abuse, both physical and emotional. She described how Richard isolated her from friends and family, how he controlled their finances, and how he manipulated her into believing she was worthless without him. "The final straw came when I found out I was pregnant," Susan said, her voice breaking. "I knew I couldn't bring a child into that environment. That's when I decided to leave." The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "And what happened when you tried to leave, Ms. Tate?" Susan closed her eyes, taking a moment to compose herself. "He threatened me, said he'd take the baby, that no one would believe me. I was terrified. That's why I ran, why I've been hiding all these years." As Susan's testimony continued, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Sympathetic murmurs replaced the earlier hostility towards Denise and Maya. Even some of Eleanor's supporters looked shaken. Richard's calm facade had completely crumbled. He fidgeted in his seat, his face a mix of anger and fear. Eleanor, for her part, sat rigid, her eyes darting between Susan and the judge. When Susan finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge thanked her for her bravery, his voice thick with emotion. Denise's lawyer stood up, addressing the court. "Your Honor, Ms. Tate's testimony clearly demonstrates the pattern of abuse and manipulation that Richard Tate has exhibited throughout his life. It corroborates the concerns my client and her daughter had about Mr. Tate's character and intentions." The judge nodded gravely, his eyes moving from Susan to Richard, then to Denise and Maya. The weight of Susan's words hung heavy in the air, and it was clear that her testimony had changed everything. As Susan stepped down from the witness stand, Eleanor Tate rose abruptly, her face a mask of cold determination. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed courtroom, "I'd like to speak on behalf of my son." The judge nodded, allowing Eleanor to take the stand. She smoothed her designer suit and fixed the courtroom with a steely gaze. "What we've heard today is nothing but a web of lies," Eleanor began, her voice dripping with disdain. "Denise Johnson and her daughter have concocted this ridiculous story to tarnish my family's good name." Denise felt her heart racing as Eleanor spoke. She glanced at Maya, who sat rigid beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "The Tates have been pillars of this community for generations," Eleanor continued. "We've donated millions to charities, created jobs, and improved lives. And this is how we're repaid? With baseless accusations and character assassination?" Eleanor's words, once so powerful and persuasive, now rang hollow in the courtroom. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the audience. Even some of her staunchest supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Ms. Johnson is clearly an unstable woman," Eleanor declared, her voice rising. "She's manipulating her own daughter, poisoning the child's mind against a good man. Richard has only ever shown kindness to them both." As Eleanor spoke, Denise noticed something changing in the courtroom. People were exchanging glances, shaking their heads. The spell that the Tate family had held over the community for so long was finally breaking. "I implore you, Your Honor," Eleanor said, her composure slipping slightly, "to see through this charity. The Tates are the victims here. We're being persecuted for our success, our influence." "Objection, Your Honor," Denise's lawyer interrupted. "Mrs. Tate is making unsubstantiated claims and attacking my client's character." The judge nodded. "Sustained. Mrs. Tate, please stick to the facts of the case." Eleanor's face flushed with anger. She tried to regain control, but her carefully crafted image was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Her words, once so persuasive, now sounded desperate and hollow. As Eleanor continued her testimony, the mood in the courtroom shifted dramatically. People who had once hung on her every word now looked at her with skepticism and even disgust. The truth about the Tate family was finally coming to light, and no amount of manipulation could change that. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat, ready to deliver the verdict. Denise felt Maya's hand tighten in hers, both of them holding their breath. "After careful consideration of all the evidence presented," the judge began, his voice firm and clear, "this court finds in favor of Denise Johnson." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Denise felt her heart skip a beat, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Richard Tate's custody claim is hereby denied," the judge continued. "Furthermore, given the substantial evidence of past abuses and the potential risk to the child, the court has decided to revoke Mr. Tate's parental rights entirely." Tears of relief sprang to Denise's eyes. She pulled Maya close, feeling her daughter trembling against her. The judge wasn't finished. "Additionally, this court orders a full investigation into Mr. Tate's history of domestic abuse. All findings will be turned over to the proper authorities for potential criminal charges." Richard's face turned ashen. He slumped in his chair, the facade of charm and confidence completely shattered. "As for Mrs. Eleanor Tate," the judge added, his gaze sweeping over to where Eleanor sat, rigid with shock, "this court strongly condemns the use of wealth and influence to manipulate the legal system and spread malicious lies within the community." Eleanor's lips tightened into a thin line, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. As the judge's gavel came down with a resounding thud, finalizing the decision, Denise felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She turned to Maya, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "We did it, sweetheart," Denise whispered, her voice choked with tears. "It's over." Maya clung to her mother, sobbing with relief. "I was so scared, Mom," she admitted. "I thought they might take me away from you." Denise stroked Maya's hair, her heart swelling with love and pride for her brave daughter. "Never," she promised. "We're together, always." As they held each other, the weight of their long struggle began to lift. The fear and uncertainty that had haunted them for months slowly ebbed away, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. Around them, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Richard was led away by his lawyers, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Eleanor sat alone, her influence in the town shattered, as people who once fawned over her now turned their backs. Denise knew that the emotional scars of this ordeal would take time to heal. The betrayal, the fear, the stress, it had all taken its toll. But as she held Maya close, feeling her daughter's heartbeat against her own, she knew they would face whatever came next together. Denise and Maya drove home in silence, the weight of their victory still settling over them. As they turned onto their street, both gasped in surprise. The entire block was lined with cars, and people milled about on their front lawn. "What's going on?" Maya asked, her voice tinged with worry. Denise slowed the car, her heart racing. After everything they'd been through, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear. But as they got closer, she saw familiar faces from their church, all wearing warm smiles. Miss Lorraine, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight, stepped forward as Denise parked the car. "Welcome home, dears," she said, her eyes twinkling with kindness. As Denise and Maya got out of the car, they were enveloped in a sea of hugs and well wishes. Tears sprang to Denise's eyes as she realized what was happening. These weren't just neighbors or church members anymore. They were a community united in support. "We're here to stand with you," Miss Lorraine explained, taking Denise's hand. "Our church has organized a demonstration to support survivors of abuse and those who stand up to injustice, like you and Maya." Maya looked around in awe. "All these people are here for us?" "For you and for everyone who's ever felt alone in their struggle." Miss Lorraine nodded. She turned to address the crowd. "Shall we begin?" The group moved to the nearby park where a small stage had been set up. People carried signs with messages of hope and support. Denise saw some that read, "Believe survivors" and "Stand against abuse." Her heart swelled with emotion. Miss Lorraine took the stage, her presence commanding despite her small stature. "Today," she began, her voice clear and strong, "we gather not just in support of Denise and Maya Johnson, but for all those who have faced abuse and injustice." The crowd listened intently as Miss Lorraine spoke words of hope and healing. She talked about the courage it takes to stand up to abusers and the importance of community support. "When we stand together," she said, her eyes finding Denise and Maya in the crowd, "we are stronger than any force that seeks to harm or control us." As Miss Lorraine's speech concluded, the crowd erupted in applause. Denise felt Maya's hand slip into hers, squeezing tight. For the first time in months, Denise felt truly safe and supported. As the days passed, Denise found herself slowly emerging from the shadows of fear and uncertainty that had clouded her life for so long. With each morning, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and strength, drawing comfort from her faith and the unwavering support of her community. One sunny afternoon, Denise sat at her kitchen table, poring over job listings. Her fingers trembled slightly as she circled a promising opportunity at a local clinic. It wasn't her old job, but it was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her career and provide for Maya. "Mom?" Maya's voice called from the living room. "Can you help me with something?" Denise smiled, setting down her pen. "Of course, sweetie. What is it?" As she walked into the living room, she found Maya surrounded by colorful posters and markers. The young girl looked up, her eyes shining with determination. "I want to make a presentation for my class about standing up against bullying. Do you think I could talk about what happened with Richard?" Denise's heart swelled with pride. She knelt beside her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I think that's incredibly brave of you, Maya. If you feel ready to share your story, it could help a lot of people." Maya nodded, her face serious. "I've been thinking about everything that happened. It was really scary. And sometimes I still feel bad about ruining your wedding day, but I know I did the right thing. I just want other kids to know they can speak up too." Tears pricked at Denise's eyes as she pulled Maya into a tight hug. "You did do the right thing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. And you didn't ruin anything. You saved us both." As they worked on Maya's presentation together, Denise marveled at her daughter's resilience. The ordeal had been traumatic for both of them, but here was Maya, turning her experience into something positive. Later that week, Denise started her new job at the clinic. As she donned her scrubs and prepared for her first shift, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The familiar routines of nursing came back to her quickly, and she found comfort in being able to help others again. During her lunch break, Denise sat in the small courtyard outside the clinic. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. For the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. She and Maya were safe. They had each other, their faith, and a community that stood behind them. As she opened her eyes, Denise noticed a small butterfly landing on a nearby flower. She watched it for a moment, marveling at its delicate beauty and strength. It reminded her of Maya and of herself. They had weathered a terrible storm, but they had emerged stronger, their wings unbroken. As the warm afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, Denise and Maya sat together on their cozy living room couch. The house was quiet, save for the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional rustle of pages as Maya flipped through her favorite book. Denise gazed at her daughter, her heart swelling with love and pride. She marveled at how much Maya had grown, not just in height, but in spirit and strength. The ordeal they had faced together had tested them both, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between them. "Mom?" Maya's voice broke the peaceful silence. "Can we make some hot chocolate?" Denise smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetie, that sounds perfect." They moved to the kitchen, working side by side to prepare their treats. As Maya stirred the cocoa, Denise noticed a newfound confidence in her daughter's movements. Gone was the fear that had once haunted her eyes. In its place was a quiet strength, a knowledge that she had faced darkness and emerged victorious. With steaming mugs in hand, they returned to the living room. Maya curled up next to her mother, resting her head on Denise's shoulder. For a moment, they simply sat there, savoring the warmth of their drinks and the comfort of each other's presence. "You know," Denise said softly, "I'm so proud of you, Maya. What you did. It wasn't easy, but you were so brave." Maya looked up at her mother, her eyes shining. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I knew I had to protect you, to protect us." Denise wrapped her arm around Maya, pulling her close. "And you did. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That's true courage." They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The afternoon light slowly shifted, casting a golden glow across the room. In that moment, both Denise and Maya felt a deep sense of peace wash over them. As they sat there, surrounded by the simple comforts of home, Denise realized how far they had come. The fear and manipulation that had once threatened to tear their lives apart were gone. In their place was a quiet strength, a resilience born from facing adversity together. Maya looked up at her mother, a small smile playing on her lips. "Mom, I'm really glad it's just us. We don't need anyone else, do we?" Denise felt her heart swell with emotion. "No, sweetie," she said, her voice filled with love. "We have each other, and that's more than enough." As the afternoon faded into evening, Denise and Maya remained cuddled together on the couch, talking softly about their hopes and dreams for the future. The world outside might still hold challenges, but in that moment they were filled with a sense of possibility and hope. If you enjoyed the story of Denise and Maya, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.